Welcome back to Only Squares. So today we have husband, father, the author of Journey to Fatherhood, Letters to My Unborn Child, Chicago native, and educator, Mr. Darnell Weathersby. How you doing tonight, sir?
Man, I'm feeling good. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We did the Black Fathers Chapel together.
Yeah.
Yeah, passionate person. You definitely believe in what you speak, and I
Oh,
think
thank
that's
you,
a
man.
magnificent thing, especially nowadays with so many people doing so many things for clout. So thank you for your time.
Right. No, I feel you. Thank you.
So growing up in West Side Chicago, tell me about that.
Yeah. Man, so I'm gonna just start off with the most humblest of beginnings. 1 pound, 15 ounces, 3 months premature. So when you say you're looking at a miracle, I mean, you looking at a miracle, Doc. I mean, from literally day one, by the grace of God, I knew I had a purpose because of what He already brought me from through birth. Um, Born single parent household, second oldest of 8 kids, once again on the west side of Chicago, with every opportunity to go astray. Drugs, gangs, violence, you name it, the opportunity was there. But by His grace, I always say I had a mother who was crazy enough to do what was ever needed to keep her kids out of the grave and out of jail. And then just the men of the church. I'm a testament of the men of the church who stepped in when my dad left. Uncles, pastors, mentors, just that you talk about a village raising you. The village, I'm a reflection of the village that stepped up and answered the call to make sure me and my siblings didn't go astray. Me and my older brother didn't go astray. And now my life is committed to making sure the next generation I can be a part of their village, and I'm just replicating what someone did for me. So yeah, man.
When you speak about replicating what someone did for you, is that what the
Yeah.
men of the church or the church itself did for everybody in your family? Or was it something about your family, your particular situation that made it special for them to want to step up?
Um. So I mean, I think about, for example, youth group ministry, high school age. Came to Christ at a young age of 8. So junior high, middle school, high school, and the church did a great job of creating platforms for all the youth ministry to use our gifts. I remember leading Bible study with my peers. Like, I think that's unheard of nowadays, but back then it was like, it's something about this young guy. He loves the Lord. He has a passion to teach. So we're going to let you drink as much as you can. We're going to give you as much as you can handle. And because they did that, I was always at the church. When the doors were open, I was there because that was kind of my niche. That was kind of where I found my value, where I found my worth. And I praise God for that. But it's because my pastors were willing to let me be and let me grow and let me make mistakes and let me cut my teeth, if you will. I'm forever indebted to them for that because they let a lot of people attempt it, but I stayed at it by His grace and I kept at it and I stayed consistent and through college and went to Trinity University in Deerfield for my undergrad, and then I actually lived, I was out in Philly for about 8 years, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, shout out, for about 8 years before moving back to Illinois. So got my master's from Temple, raised both of my kids were born at Harrisburg Hospital. So we, were able to get our roots down and then come back home, to the Illinois area, Chicagoland area. And now I've been assistant principal. This is my 18th year in education,
Sheesh,
12
congrats.
years an administrator. Yeah, man. So a lot of different hats, but I mean, too much is given, much is required, is what I hear. So
Man, that's a fact. You talk about staying consistent, right?
yeah,
How hard was it, or how, because I know it probably made you a target to stay consistent in your
yeah,
church in high school in West Side Chicago during your era.
Yeah.
without people, constantly trying you, testing you? How'd you
Yeah.
navigate that?
Well, it's funny, man. I tell people all the time, when God's hand is on you, His hand is on you, and but also, you know, the all the guys in the neighborhood, they knew, like,
Mm,
hey, that church van is pulling up every Wednesday and every Sunday, and that little boy is getting in that van every Wednesday and every Sunday. So like they just was like, hey, that's Darnell, that's
yeah,
Marcus' little brother. Don't do it. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So um, it's just one of those things where even in the hood, they see it, and even in the hood, they're like, man, he truly ain't trying to do nothing out here. So just let that man get on that church van, let him go. So I mean, I look back at it now and it was nothing but his hand. I can't take credit for it, but once again, I believe you got to put yourself in a position for doors like that to open, for opportunities like that to open. And because they saw my consistency and they
Hmm.
saw my passion, they were like, man, it's enough going on out here. He got a chance to make it. If he got a chance to do right, we're going to let that man do it. So, yeah, man.
So not only was the church looking out for you, but the hood was looking out for you too.
True story.
And
Yeah.
but and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's because you were already putting in the work. You hear kind of the same thing with
Yeah.
athletes, right? Everyone knows that's the guy that plays basketball, that's the guy that plays
Yeah.
football, right?
Exactly.
That's all he
Exactly.
does.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Welcome, Dr. Taylor. So that consistency kind of kept you protected, and I think that's a theme that may need to be elaborated on at some point in time. How consistency
Yeah.
to keep you
Yeah.
protected. Now, did you
Yep.
ever sway? Did you ever feel like you needed to fit in? Or when can you truly say you were comfortable not fitting in?
Well, I think, when you grow up in poverty, single parent household, the temptation is always there because, for example, you see your mom struggling
Right.
and you're like, man, I can't stand seeing her work this hard and make so little. So the temptation, that little voice is always saying, dude, if you can just find a way to hit a sweet lick and you know what I'm saying, be able to help out more. I've been paying bills since I was 13 years old. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Summer job, all of that. Like I've always been working, always grinding. But it was one of those things where, that delayed gratification was taught to me like, hey, if you put in the work now, you'll be able to do more for your mother and for your family 20 years from now, doing it the right way and sustain it versus coming up quick and then lose it all and then on any given night. So I think I had enough words of wisdom and enough examples of men saying, hey, I know you tempted to get the quickest route, but
Hmm.
I'm telling you, there's something about this long game that will pay off. Just trust us. Just trust us. So I praise God for them just speaking that into me, man.
Yeah, I remember in college, some of our, fellow classmates, they were from out of town and
Yeah.
something happens back home and they
Yeah.
want to rush home. And it's like I remember someone said, "What are you rushing home for?" Right?
Yep.
Like it doesn't matter
Yep.
what's going on. You're not a doctor. You're not a millionaire.
Yeah.
Like take your time, get there safely. There's no need to hit the
Yep.
road and do something crazy and end up getting hurt. And
True
so
story.
and that's the same thing I'm hearing from your story is long game, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
always going to be easy, but as long as I'm consistent, the way will
Yeah.
reveal itself. I remember a parable about it was like a race, right? And you
Yeah.
go over the mountain or you can go around the mountain, right?
Mm.
And so the cheater decided to go around the mountain. And then the
Yeah.
final obstacle is this boulder that you got to push. But he couldn't
Okay.
budge this boulder. And then the other contestant went over the mountain. When he came down, he could push the boulder. And the reason why was because the things he had to go through and the strength he had to have to go up and
Yep.
over the mountain prepared him to push that boulder as opposed to
Yeah.
going around it.
Yep. That's real. That's
That's
real.
good.
That's real.
That's awesome. Wow. Sound
So
like a preacher.
Don't do that. So we're in Chicago. We graduated
Yeah.
high school, right?
Yep.
We hit
Lane Tech High
Trinity.
School, shout out. Yeah.
Why did you choose that particular university or college?
So the lack of temptation, you know, growing up West Side Chicago, I knew how much I could take, and I couldn't take that environment much longer. So I was like, I need to go
Mm,
to a small Christian school, get my foundation solidified and secure, hone my
Mhm.
gifts. Um, I was an hour away from Chicago, so I was close enough to get home, like you said. But at the same time, I was far enough away to assert myself as a man and
yeah.
get my footing as a man. So I think
Okay.
that was important. It was important for me to do it that way. Yeah.
Earlier, you said when your father left, do you have or did you have a relationship with your father? Do you remember that, or that was before your
Man,
time?
so my parents divorced when I was 3.
Okay.
Um, so I think it was one of those things where it's like the memories are very faint, but the the father wound, as I like to refer to it, is ever healing and ever evolving and maturing. And unfortunately he passed in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. But
Wow.
our relationship as adults was much more better than it ever was when I was a kid. You know,
Mhm.
he became a Christian. He was walking with the Lord. I was able, by the grace of God, to forgive him,
Mm-hmm.
um, because once again, he only did what he knew how to do. You know what I'm saying? If you come from a situation, his dad passed when he was 11, so now you got that thing of if my dad wasn't there to guide me, I don't know what it means to be there to guide you. And he
Mhm.
succumbs to some things of his own. So it's one of those things where it's like, I could use this as motivation. I can use this to be angry, or I could use it as motivation to be the dad I wish I had. You know what I'm saying? Not knocking him,
Right.
but at the
Right.
same time, I can't let this cycle repeat. I refuse to let this cycle repeat. So, I mean, for the long time, I used to say, man, if my dad could not hold on to my mom, who's the most gorgeous black woman I ever met, is it even in me to be the man I'm desiring to be? And once
Mhm.
again, those mentors, my uncles, my older brother, all these men were like, you can be and you will be
Hmm.
what God has put in you to be as the husband and father you desire to be. And 17 years later, 2 kids. That's nothing but a miracle and nothing but God's grace, man. But it comes from that desire to say, my wife will never experience the brokenness I saw my mom experience. My kids will never experience the lack that I experienced,
Mm-hmm.
the burden that I experienced, they will never experience that as long as I'm breathing. But I had to use that brokenness to compel me to have health for my household when I necessarily didn't experience myself.
You answered my next
Wow.
question. I was gonna say what made you like step up, right? Because it's easy to say, "Well, my dad wasn't there." My
Yeah,
mom, she did all right. Like I'm fine, right? So I
yep,
can continue,
yep,
like you said, cycles. I can continue that
man,
cycle because she's
yeah,
all right. So I'll just do the same thing. But you mentorship again,
yeah,
community stepping in again.
yep,
Inside the church and outside the church, saying, "Hey,
no
man,
doubt.
that ain't you. You know what you're supposed to
Yeah,
do."
yep,
Got anything,
yep,
MT?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie. I was looking and I had all these questions. I said, I'm gonna ask a question about the book. I gotta ask a question about the book.
yeah,
And I go two places now. I have a bias. I go two places. I go September. Anytime that there's dates in the book, I go September or December. September is when I was
yeah,
born. December is when I was married, and I knew who I was talking to. So in
yeah,
December 17th, you mentioned this. This is the first day of this weekend. Kind of pre-birthing. This birthing class. So I want you to talk about. Shout out to that book, man. It was a good, because I wish it now. I'm like, well, maybe I need to have a fourth kid to chronicle out that journey. but
Don't
Hey,
bite.
I'll just
Don't bite.
don't have your wife trying to cut me, man.
yeah, no. We ain't gonna talk about cuts. That's a different story. But
True story.
I was gonna ask, can you talk about? I was gonna ask, can you talk about that, the challenges and the joys of kind of breaking some of them cycles pre-birth, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I know you do a lot after birth, and I just watch you on social media with your kids. But tell us
yeah,
about that soon to be father, like preparing for that and breaking some of the cycles that might have started showing up before they were
yeah,
even born. I'm just interested
yeah.
to hear that perspective.
So let me start off why the reason why I even publish. So I always tell people I journaled for 9 months to stay sane. Like
Mm.
all these fears, all these doubts, all the
Mhm.
transparency of the book, those were like real life emotions I just had to put on paper. It was like that book was my therapist for 9 months. I just had to get all those things out. And I said, you know what? In the midst of my fear, I want my soon to be child, my daughter, for example, in the book, to know my journey so that when she ever questions, man, why is my dad the way he is? Like she at least has a 9 month snapshot of, man, he was preparing for me and walking through this journey before I was even born. You know, so
Mhm.
it was meant to be just a gift to her when she got married. You know,
Okay.
but then the Lord spoke and said, man, there are millions of young men who are navigating this season of fear because once again, I've never seen anybody put a crib together. I even my friends who had fathers, I've never
Wow.
seen them have a conversation about preparing to be a father. It's a conversation us as men. Very few people I know were fortunate enough to say, "Hey, son, here's some emotions you might be feeling. Here's some things you need to consider. You know when to start putting the nursery together. Here are some emotions your wife or significant other may be feeling. Here's how you should or could respond." I've never heard that conversation. So my thing was, if I can help one father prepare, or at least I always say, whether you're a soon to be dad or a new dad, it's the same struggle. It's some of the same emotions, whether your child is 3 months or 3 years old. You're
Mm.
Mhm.
navigating transition after transition after
Mm.
transition. So I just wanted to put my heart on paper and challenge other men. The cool thing about it is I have a couple different guys from across the country who got my book in the appropriate amount of time, and then they started journaling. So now they have a journal to give their children, who will
Beautiful.
one day prayerfully share with their children. So like that's
Mhm.
been the coolest thing about this project is other dads have internalized the journaling process. Especially as black men, we're not taught
Mhm.
to be vulnerable. We like stumble upon being vulnerable. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if I can provide some intentionality to dads and black men in particular to say, you know what you're feeling is an isolated emotion. Other men, generation after generation, have felt the way you feel. So you're not alone. So let's navigate this together. Let's have that conversation together. Let's walk this journey together. So I was just honored to put my 9 month journey from paper to pen and then publish it. And God just keeps breathing on it one man at a time. So
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful.
yeah,
And I guess another question. I'm passionate about father renewal, right? Because I feel
no doubt.
that there's so many different things going on in society, and we
Yeah.
don't really invest in fatherhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
We as a
Nope.
society, right? We invest on a lot of different things, father
Mm-hmm.
adjacent, but not necessarily
Yeah.
fatherhood itself. And
Yep.
I just want to know what would you say And I can't help but to think in threes, but it don't have to be three, whatever number you come up with. But let's say your top, fatherhood renewal, tips or tools or
Mhm.
transformative, stuff. And I also recognize that I'm talking to an educator. So however you
Man,
want to break this, I'm just so curious. I
I,
love asking good
yeah,
fathers, hey, what do you think it takes for father renewal, right? And I might be
yeah,
somebody who's like, I might have a good relationship with my kids, but I
yeah,
just don't feel like I'm being the best father in this moment. Can you help
yeah.
help me? Yeah.
So I think, what's funny, I think back to like my relationship with my dad, like he missed my, elementary school graduation. He missed my high school graduation, but he was at my college graduation. He was at my wedding. So I use that as an example to say God can restore if your
Mhm.
heart's willing.
Wow. Wow.
He may not have deserved my forgiveness, but
Mm.
I couldn't evolve into the man I am today if I held that grudge. Because I'm
Wow.
just drinking poison and killing myself.
Right.
So I had
That's
to
good.
make a conscious decision to say, is he perfect? Of course not. But even as, a college graduate and as a young father and hey dad, I think this is the girl. I think she the one. And I needed to hear his words of affirmation speak life into me and walk me through that season. No matter how dysfunction our past was, I needed my dad in that moment. So I think to answer your question, as the dad, if you have an estranged relationship, it just requires extreme patience. Like your kid deserves to have an opportunity to be angry. I
Wow.
remember my freshman year in college, I flew out. He lived in San Diego most of my life. I flew out to San Diego and we had the most heart of heart conversations. He was like, "Hey, say whatever you got to say, however you need to say it, because you my son. So I know you pissed off. I know you angry. So just say what you got to say." So
Wow.
I look back at it, and that was one of the most therapeutic moments I needed because I needed to be able to speak my heart, speak my
Yeah.
hurt, speak my anger, and him not try to deflect or defend. So I think if I'm
Mm.
talking to dads, don't deflect, don't defend, don't try to explain your way out of it. If you messed up, own it, learn from it, acknowledge it, because once again, you're teaching your son to do those things. You're teaching your daughter that it's okay for a man to do those things. I think about myself when I mess up, talk about building new legacies. I'm quick to turn around to my children and say, yo, I'm sorry I lost my temper. I'm sorry I
Yes.
raised my voice. I'm sorry I disrespected you or offended you. I'm sorry you had to see me raise my voice at your mother like that. Would you forgive me?
Wow. Wow.
Once
Yep. I do
again,
that too.
yeah, you have to, man, because once again, talk about them replicating something. I may not be perfect. I don't claim to be, but I pray I'm dropping enough seeds and the nuggets for them to say, yeah, he lost his temper, but he also asked for forgiveness. They
Wow.
need to see that. My daughter and my son need to desperately see that. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's so profound. That gets me excited, and I think that kind of giving children the space to be angry, giving them a
no
space to
doubt.
kind of communicate real emotion, because we're all from urban areas, right? So the
Yeah, man.
idea that giving kids the space to be angry, right?
Right.
Like that is foreign because it's like, what you got to add to for, right? And we would
Right,
say
right.
stuff like, I brought you in this where I could take you out. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Come
Do
on.
you know how detrimental that is? Right?
Yeah.
Like that's profound, right? And in
Yeah.
some people, I wouldn't even challenge your kids because some of them bigger than you. So I don't know if you're gonna be able to
Right,
take them out.
right,
So
right.
I
That's
don't
my
know. Now I
that's
have
my
a I have
rich
a
parent poor parent theory. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so here's the theory. if you grew up in a certain demographic, urban, inner city, you were told that rich kids can do whatever they want and their parents don't care,
Right.
right? You had to be in before the street lights. You better not slam the screen door, so on and so forth. I know it's not the whole of it, but I
Yeah.
think a part of it is this: the rich kids, their parents are in charge somewhere outside of their household.
Yeah.
So when they come
Mm,
home, they don't feel the need to be in charge of everything.
Mm,
Some of our
wow.
parents were not looked highly upon in society, were not
Yeah.
looked highly upon at their job, or anywhere else they went. So
Yeah.
when they got to us, they
They're
said,
gonna be in
"Oh no,
control of
I'm in
something.
charge." Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to do this. You
yes.
better do this. Don't talk to me like this. Don't talk to me
Wow.
like that. Basically,
Yeah.
taking out things on you that they should have took out on society. Not to say they did it
Yeah.
intentionally. It was an emotional thing, but that's just my theory on it.
No, that's real.
No,
That's real.
that's good.
Yeah. I mean, my wife, I joke all the time, being an educator for 18 years, a principal for 12, my wife quick to be like, hey, we not your students. You're going to have to, I'm going to need you, I'm going to need you to switch hats. I'm going to need you to switch hats, man. Because we
Yeah.
not your students. You're going to have to, we don't need Principal Weathersby right now. We need daddy. We need husband.
Tell me
So,
about tell me about this urban school and a suburban school. What are some of the key differences that you noticed? I mean, a lot of people
man,
say it's
Mm.
funding, but
yeah,
let me know what are those differences that you saw. Which one did you enjoy more? Which one did you think you had a
yeah.
bigger impact on? Like, and which one would you go back to? What do you rather?
So
And
it's
look, you can
funny.
speak
My
a
first,
hypothetical.
huh? Say it again.
I said you can speak a hypothetical. We don't want to cause no trouble, principal.
No, no, no. So I always say my first 10 years in education were all urban ed. 90 to 95% minority. Um, and they needed me. They
Mm,
needed me because I was that uncle, I was that father, I was that pastor, I was that guy. Many of them going home, and I'm speaking in general terms, many of them going home to situations where there was no deep voice, where there
mm,
was no manly back and forth communication. So that was a different hat I wore, if you will. But then my wife, when I graduated from Temple in 2010, she said, for lack of better words, the hood will always need you. But in suburban America, if you don't go, they'll never experience us.
Mm.
oh
So
wow.
I
Wow.
always say the last, 12 years of my career, I have been almost like a missionary, if you will. The first ever African American administrator in the history of Mechanicsburg School District. You know, every district I've been to, I've been the first something.
Mm,
And that's kind of been, I always say, God has knit me together to walk in that.
mm,
So when you go to suburban America, you carry the weight of your race at all times
mm,
because it's
Mm.
so few. If
mm,
only 2% of all educators are black men, period, and then you go to the suburbs, think of what those chances are. You know what I'm saying? So I always say I was built to be doing what I'm doing where I'm doing it right now, but only because I had the experiences that I had growing up where I grew up and starting my career, cutting my teeth the way I did. So now I'm comfortable enough in my own skin to be what I need to be. I always go back to two experiences. When I was in Mechanicsburg, my first day, my first month on the job. Once again, first ever African American administrator. The first day of school, I'm walking down the hallway and this African American young lady comes yelling, "He's here! He's here!" Top of her lungs, just yelling. And I was like, "Good morning, pleasure to meet you too." And she's like, "No, you don't understand. We've been waiting all summer for this moment. I've
Wow.
been in this district from K to 12 and have never had an adult who me in this district. And
mm.
now you're walking down our hallway with your suit on, and we've been waiting." Um, a Caucasian young man walks up to me. He says, "Mr. Weathersby, we've been watching you." And I said, "Really?" And he said, when they hired you, we thought they hired you just to look after the minority kids.
Oh wow.
But we've watched you and we've noticed you care about all of us. And we didn't expect that. Thank you.
Oh.
Wow. Wow.
So
You know,
that's my
wow.
experience in a nutshell.
So, so Darnell, you don't know this. You've never heard me tell you this. Brian doesn't know what I'm about to say. But it's so funny, and I don't know why I never shared it with either of you. But I was an administrator at a particular college or university near Mechanicsburg. Let's say across the
Okay.
river, hypothetically, in Middletown, Pennsylvania. And
Yep.
I had a student who went to Mechanicsburg, and I
Mm,
always went. She was staring at me, and I'm like, "Wait, I'm a young administrator. I wasn't sure what was going on." She said,
right.
"You remind me of my assistant principal. This is a true story." And she
Wow.
went to the game and she was talking about, she said his name was Mr. Weathersby, right? And this is like maybe a month before you spoke at Penn State Harrisburg campus, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, you are, and she was a bio student. She said, I was going to change my major, but you told me, and she was like, I don't know if you talked to Mr. Webb. I'm like, I heard he's coming on campus because Rashawn, but he said, he told me that it's not a matter of, she wants to be a doctor. And by the way, she just graduated med school a couple years ago, but she said, he told me that I can do it if I put the work into it. And you told me don't give up on my dream. And so it's just
Yes.
amazing how she was able to be receptive to me, right? Because you were kind of like that
That's it.
missionary to her. And now
Yep.
it's kind of so when she does her rotations and she sees a black male patient, it's like, whoa,
Yes.
whoa, my experience is different, right?
Mm.
And
Yes.
it was amazing. And I'll say this, and I was gonna say her name, but I can't because of this particular point.
Yeah. Yeah.
She grew up in a family where going to med school was you had to, right?
Yep.
But she said, I've never had a male in my family tell me that I could.
Mm.
Ooh.
And here you have these black males, right? These black, and
Yes.
I tell
Yes.
Charlie was just saying, G, so these black fathers, right, who
Yeah.
have this dual responsibility, right? I kind of felt like
Yeah.
I was a father. Someone asked me, and I don't mind sharing this, right, briefly. Like somebody asked me, how do you were a young professional? How did you stay focused, right? And I mean that in the what I mean. And I said because I
Yeah.
didn't see them as peers, I saw them as children, right? And
No
not an
doubt.
insult, but I had a double responsibility, right? Like there's a power
Yes.
dynamic. And so I want to say thank you, right? Because
Yeah.
for the students that came from Mechanicsburg, you made it kind of easier for me, right, to kind of
Yes.
move forward. And that's a true story. We could talk offline about that student, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just it's amazing when you say that. Gee, if I can ask one more question, can I ask one more question?
Of course.
I I I I and you kind of mentioned this, but this is where I actually need help. I'm gonna be vulnerable for a moment, right?
Yeah. Let's talk, man.
How do you get to a place in your walk in fatherhood
Yeah.
where you step back, how do I word it, and you let your kids make the mistake. You know it's going to be terrible, and I'm not talking about detrimental, but you know it's going to be terrible,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
not intervene. How do you do that, like on a practical level? Because I have an 8-year-old who, he's first, so I'm a little bit more protective. I'm sure G can speak to, you're first, you're kind of like, whoa, but how do you kind of
Yeah.
just sit back? Because it's hard for me to do that, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, come on,
But
here you
I'll
go.
say
Be a
this.
parent. Yeah.
Um, I don't do it well. I'm just gonna be real because coming where we come from, every mistake can be life altering.
That's a
Yeah.
You know
fact.
what I'm saying? So it's like I'm continually have to train myself to say their experience is not my experience. I grew up
Mm.
food stamps, low income, shelters, you name it, lights cut off, all of that. That was my evictions. That was my experience. But my kids know nothing of that. they've only known middle class. So I think I have to retrain my mind to say the stakes I was up against aren't isn't their environment.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the privilege to stumble and recover. And I
Right.
have to train myself to know they have the safety net I wish I had.
Wow.
They have the security I longed for. So, with that being said, I have to trust that the God that kept me is the God who's gonna keep them. My
Mm,
daughter's going to middle school, you know, and every dad who hears those words are like, "Oh, here you go," you know. Um,
hmm
but I have to trust that the fathering and the parenting that my wife and I have invested into her at this age and season, her foundation is being solidified
Mm.
more than we give ourselves credit for. You see what I'm saying?
mm,
Because as men, we're always pushing and pushing and pushing, and that's a good thing. But then my wife, in her words of wisdom, is consistently saying, "But babe, you're doing a great job. You are a good husband. You are a good father. Give yourself room to just enjoy and relish in what you are doing and how you are impacting your children and those you come in contact with." And I think a lot of times
yeah,
as black men in particular, we may have achieved a lot, but we're always grinding. We're always looking
Yeah.
for that next opportunity. And we don't slow down long enough to say, you know what? It's going to be okay.
mm,
If the God who's brought me this far, the future is going to be just fine because he's already done the miracle. The fact that we're sitting here in our right mind, having this conversation, being the
mm.
husbands and fathers that we are, come on, that ain't supposed to be, you know? So I think
Wow.
if we think about, I always tell people, reflect on his track record. And if you look at his
Mm.
track record, the next obstacle shouldn't be as daunting as we allow it to be if we
Mm,
truly reflect upon what he's already done. But
Right.
one of my
yeah.
mentors always says sometimes we can have spiritual amnesia. Sometimes we just forget. He's been so good and so gracious, and he's done so much that when you look at, oh man, I can't let my kid do that. I can't let my kid do this. And God is like, slow down. I've brought you through everything I've brought you through. Don't you think if I could bring you through, I'm going to keep your children?
Mm,
And then I'll be like, yeah, you're
yeah.
right. You're right. Let me slow down long enough to acknowledge who I'm talking to. So that's what I would say is,
Wow.
man, just when you're tempted to not let go, reflect upon what he's already done for you as a husband and as a father, and just know if he's been faithful to you, he's going to be faithful to them.
Wow. That's profound. I'm taking notes. I'm like, yeah, because it's hard
Man,
for me. Right? But I appreciate that's good. And I think, can I ask a whimsical question? I
yeah,
just want to, I always want to ask these type of questions because I never asked them
no,
in
it's
actual interviews or nothing like that. If you had to go and talk to a historical father, right? Historical father,
mm,
like someone that's not your dad, but a historical father
yeah,
throughout any age, right? Throughout any age
mm,
on any continent, who would it be, and what would you ask them about fatherhood?
yeah.
I always wanted to ask
That's a
that
good
question.
one. That's a good one, man. I guess something about me, and I don't know if it's a particular person, but I think a person in a particular season of life. So, for example, unfortunately, many times in our community, the women live forever. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
70, they 80, they 90. But how many of us live long enough to be grandfathers,
Yeah.
Mm,
let alone great grandfathers? So I think I would love to just surround myself in this season of life with more saged or seasoned black men in particular who can say, you know what? I've been the dad, and here's how I navigated it. I've been a
Mm,
granddad, and still married, mind you. Like, I want to be around that guy. That guy that says, yeah, I'm 75 and my wife is 72. We've been married for 45 years. I want time with that guy because I want to know how is he investing in his children's children while still loving his wife in that season
mm,
that they're in. Like, I want to be around that guy as much as possible in this season and soak in his mindset, soak in his patience, soak in his game plan. Like, did you stumble upon this success or did you have a plan? You
Mm-hmm.
know,
hmm
that's what I want more in this season because I think I always tell people, um, every man needs someone pouring into them. Every man needs someone to do life with, and every man needs someone to pour into. And
Yeah.
I think a man is most stable when they have all three in working order.
Yeah.
It's not good enough just to be poured into because you become stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just talk to your peers because they know what you know. And if you're only pouring into somebody, you're going to burn out. So the question is, how as men do we allow ourselves to function successfully at all three levels? I think I'm
wow.
most fulfilled when I know I have men to go to who've been further along than I have been. I'm most sustained, I'm most successful when I have men who I can do life with who are in a similar season of life. But then I got to have those young men I'm strategically investing in because it keeps me sharp, because I know
Mm-hmm.
somebody's watching and I'm accountable to how I'm living because they're trying to replicate what they see in me. So I think that's how I look at it. But yeah, to answer your question, I would love to be around more grandfathers, if you will.
hmm
Yeah,
Wow.
That's great, man.
Wow.
That's
That's
great.
awesome.
That is laid out. There's a plan for it, and that you're um, cognizant of the levels. Different
yeah,
ages, different seasons, and the purpose of
yep,
those people, or your purpose and the lives of those people, is
yeah,
very important as well. I know I see it all the time
yep,
in entrepreneurship, where everything's for young entrepreneurs, and that's
right.
because whether they want to say it or not, they want to eat off the young entrepreneurs who are unexperienced. Whereas you're doing it
Mm,
as simply, altruistic. You're just pouring into them.
no
And
doubt.
so I think that's very noble. Everything done in the dark comes to
Thank
light
you.
eventually, right? So it's
Yeah,
noble that you do it that way, even with your start, with your upbringing, with
yeah,
your trials and tribulations, spoken and unspoke of, being consistent,
yeah.
following your path, even if you were the only, even if you were the only square in there. This is
That's
my
it,
path.
man.
This is what I'm doing. So that
Yep.
that garners respect, man. It garners respect.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, man.
And so 9 years ago or so, you and the wife decide to start Lead One.
Yeah, man.
What was that conversation like? Whose idea was it? What's
Yeah.
the long term plan?
So I think, once again, both of us love speaking. My wife, the passion I have for men, my wife has the same passion for working women and working mothers and helping them be all that God has called them to be in the many hats that women wear. So, we always were speaking at conferences and workshops and seminars, and the Lord was like, "You've been doing this on behalf of people for a while. Why not bet on yourself and create a platform by which I can use the unique talents I've given you and the unique
hmm
passions I've given you?" We always say everybody has a sphere of influence. The people I'm touching, God has placed in my sphere of influence. Each of you have a sphere of influence of people I probably will never meet, But if I can equip you to be all that God has called you to be and maximize your sphere of influence, then everybody in your sphere of influence will win. So
Hmm.
I think that's the thing. A lot of times, as we say, you're a leader because you have a title, you're a leader because you have a certain position. And what Lead One is saying is, you're a leader, period. Now,
Yes.
if you continue to grow in it, the titles will come, the positions will come. But you're a
Hmm.
leader because you have a sphere of influence. No matter how small or how big, we all have one. So the question is, what are we going to do to maximize it? So at its core, that's what Lead One is. Everyone can lead one. Everyone can lead someone because you have at least one person that's looking at you,
Hmm.
one person that's watching your every step and your every move. So it's not a matter of if you have influence; it's a matter of have you been trained and equipped and empowered to maximize it. So at its core, 9 years ago we started Lead One because we knew God had given us a message and God had given us a platform with men and women in particular. And we just wanted to, once again, maximize that so that as He was broadening our platform, we were strategic in how we were. Our whole goal is to grow because we're empowering others. And if we can be blessed because we're blessing people, I don't know of a better win-win situation. So, yeah.
And so 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you know, Lead One is doing what? Are you doing corporate events? Are you still in the community? Are you working with
Yeah.
universities? Like, what
Um,
is your target audience?
so for me, my deepest passion is new husbands and new fathers.
Okay.
Like that's because I think when I talk about shattering generational curses, we have an apparel line, and one of our key forms of apparel is the cycle ends with me. I'm a firm believer everybody has a generational curse they're trying to shatter. Everyone. For me, it was divorce and domestic violence. For somebody else, it might be poverty and obesity. I mean, everybody's
Right.
navigating something. So it's
Right.
not, once again, it's not a matter of if you have a cycle you're trying to break. It's have you identified it and do you have the tools necessary to shatter it? And
Hmm.
and, and once again, not just for yourself, but prepare the next generation to do the same. So I think, one of my passions and one thing I've noticed is so many black men, but just men in particular, have a phobia for commitment. They've seen so many broken marriages and so many
Hmm.
dysfunctional households. They're like, why get married? Why? Why should I get married when all I see is marriages ending in divorce? Why bother? So I think one of my deepest passions is to train up another generation and another generation. One of my mentees say, man, ever since we were, for example, I have a couple of mentees who I taught as high schoolers and now they're married with children, and they're
Nice.
like, and I've been able to keep up with them throughout the years. And they're like, man, you just made marriage look so cool, Mr. Weathersby. Like, you was the one dude that really loved your wife and we knew it. Like, you was the one dude that wanted to get home to your wife. So we like, man, we just saw that. And we were like, man, if he thinks it's that cool, once again, when they found out, man, I think I've met her, Mr. Weathersby. And I'm like, yo, let's talk about it. Now,
Yeah.
what you gonna do about it? If she the one, you gonna man up, or you gonna punk out. So I think at my core, that's my sweet spot. I might be 95 years old, and I'm still gonna be telling men to man up. I'm still gonna be telling guys
Yes,
to,
sir.
don't be afraid to commit. Like that's gonna be in my core to the Lord take me home. Um, so to answer your question, there's some things that are just deeply ingrained in me just because of my upbringing and what I've experienced. But at the same time, I'm a published author. I'm in the process of publishing a Christian children's book series. So this is one of the first times of me actually talking about it. But if everything goes right, the first of three books will be out late June. So
Nice.
I'm always,
Congrats.
just grinding with the
Wow.
next project.
Awesome.
Once again, trying to create platforms and opportunities for our children to see themselves. I think representation is powerful and truly underrated. And therefore, however I can strategically, using my educator hat, if you will, and my mentoring hat with this new project, those two get to come together to provide an example of what it looks like for a young black man to navigate school as a Christian. So I'm really excited about this new project that I'll be communicating much more here soon. So yeah,
Please do, man. Like as soon as you send it, anything you need me to put out,
I
we're gonna put
appreciate
that
that,
out,
man.
man. I feel like
Yeah,
it's needed, it's
yeah,
necessary, and that's you. You're not
yeah,
you're not an avatar or something else. Like it's who you are from
yeah.
the way you came up, being consistent. Again, that's who you are. So you can
That's it,
definitely
man.
speak on that. I want to take this opportunity to, and I invite you two to do the same. I just want to shout out some fathers, man. So shout
Yeah,
out Scott, shout out Cam, D, Shamar, shout out my man Carnivore Mike, my purse
yeah,
NT, shout out Bam, shout out my man David, rest in peace. Shout out my brother, and shout out my father. Love you, Dad.
yeah, yeah, man. Shout out
Wow.
to Marcus. Shout out to Pastor Gerald. Shout out to Liddell. Shout out to all the men in New Hope Bible Church who raised me. Shout out to my dad who did the best he could, rest his soul. Shout out to my Uncle Gary who raised me as his own. Um, Shout out to all the men, that are now fathers that I get a chance to mentor, the Laquans of the world. Shout out to you, man. Proud of you. Yeah,
Wow. So, man, y'all, so y'all shouting out people. Okay, so definitely shout out to Charles Marcellus Taylor Sr., my dad. Shout out to PJ, my mentor, Dr. Jenkins. Shout out to Purse, Jabron, and Darnell for continuing trekking in the work since I was a grad student. Man, you've
yeah,
been plowing this thing. Shout out to uncles and the different men who stepped up in my life that
yeah.
are so numerous to count. But then also shout out to the man, I've never met his name, but I believe he was a father. I was on the L, and I was about to do something really silly in Philly and just kind of going along with the crowd. He said, "You look different, man. Like don't go that. Like don't do that." And shout out
Yeah,
to him for being a father to me in that moment, because if I would have got caught, that would have just added some unnecessary drama in my life. So I
true
shout out to
story.
him, man, at the Cinnabon in the gallery in Philly. Shout out to him.
That's what's up, man.
That's fire. That's how
Yeah.
it should be. Listen, only squares. Legal lasts longer. Father, entrepreneur, educator, husband,
That's what's
consistent
up.
follower of the faith, Mr. Darnell Weathersby, my
Yeah.
purse, Mr. Marcellus Taylor, and myself. G, we love y'all. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon. Peace.
All
Peace.
right. Appreciate it, man.